Well, Bernie Sanders had the opportunity to go off. So there's that, at least. It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right. Bernie Sanders doesn't need to pretend to give a shit anymore because democracy is dead, and Bernie Sanders is not going to run for another term. He just won, again, for Senate. That's 6 more years. By the time this term ends, he'll be, I don't know, 500? This is his last term. If he even makes it through this one. First, it was the white working class. Now it is Latino and black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change. And they're right. Today, while the very rich are doing phenomenally well, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and we have more income and wealth inequality than ever before. Unbelievably, real inflation-accounted for weekly wages for the average American worker are actually lower now than they were 50 years ago. Today, despite an explosion in technology and worker productivity, many young people will have a worse standard of living than their parents, and many of them worry that artificial intelligence and robotics will make a bad situation even worse. Today, despite spending far more per capita than other countries, we remain the only wealthy nation not to guarantee healthcare to all as a human right, and we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We, alone among major countries, cannot even guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today, despite strong opposition from a majority of Americans, we continue to spend billions funding the extremist Netanyahu government's all-out war against the Palestinian people, which has led to the horrific humanitarian disaster of mass malnutrition and the starvation of thousands of children. Will the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarchy, which has so much economic and political power? Probably not. In the coming weeks and months, those of us concerned about grassroots democracy and economic justice need to have some very serious political discussions. Genuinely, all of the Democrats who have shit-talked Bernie or who were against him versus Hillary, like this is kind of you. This is your moment. You star of the show. Take stage. Get under the spotlight. Welcome. Everything he said, everything we said, has all happened. It was just historic underperformance by Kamala Harris in large part because she wasn't able to bring people out. And what was like bold populist rhetoric. Admittedly, it was bold populist rhetoric that was psychotic and insane and wrong and lying, but it doesn't matter. There's a good reason Bernie was always an independent. Yeah, we don't deserve him. Do you genuinely think this will cause a change in the Democratic Party? I don't know what the Democratic Party is going to do once the Trump machine rolls up in 2025. I don't know what they're going to shift to. I know they're not going to take this advice at face value. That's for sure. They're probably going to learn the lesson that, I don't know, you need to be more transphobic to win or something. Yeah, they're going to run Liz Cheney. Dems are going moderate socially and populist economically. I don't think they're getting populist economically. Because there's only two ways you can be populist economically. You can be populist economically in a way that kowtows and concedes to capital, which would just make them a weaker version of the Republican Party, or they can kowtow in the other direction and be populist in like a socialist direction, which they can't do because that would challenge the capital class. You're describing the good situation. That would be a positive. If the Democrats stayed relatively hawkish on immigration and social issues, but went left-leaning on economics, that would be a win compared to the current status quo. That would be a preferable alternative to have your own like little like miniature third positionist. We'll have some like Huey Long-esque economic populism, but also we're going to like basically like do class reductionism, completely ignore black and brown people, you know? But we're not getting that. Billionaires like Mark Cuban propped up the Democratic campaigns this year. Well, no, billionaires overwhelmingly broke for Trump. That's what like the Democrats can't like get their head around. You can kowtow all you want to the capital class. Like they will go for the more capitalist-friendly candidate, you know? You can't rely on them. Yeah, Kamala wouldn't even say whether she'd remove Lena Khan at the FTC. Maybe you shouldn't listen to them, I shall overcome. I mean, that's kind of the problem, right? Like one of the reasons this turned out the way it did is that so many people listen to like podcasters and YouTubers and streamers and such that are just like casually pro-Trump in a really stupid, low IQ, uninformed way, thus normalizing those positions. Yesterday, Hassan got a ton of libs who blamed him for the Dems' loss because he supposedly discouraged his community from voting while Hassan was sitting there with an I voted 2024 state. Liberals are going to desperately look for people to blame. You're going to get a lot of shit like this. But like, if you are a liberal and you're blaming leftward, you are genuinely insane and you deserve this administration. I hope that Trump's team takes you first. Like it's one thing to be upset with the left generally. I often am. But if you unironically think an underperformance of 15 million voters is because, like, even though Jill Stein, like, got basically no votes, Jill Stein got like 0.6% or something. So in an environment where, like, this is the case and everyone everywhere shifted right, and you're like, well, this is because of socialists on Twitter, then you're just looking for people to blame in a desperate effort to create like a us them narrative that doesn't involve being oppositional to the right. I understand being angry and upset. I understand, like, but I'm consistent on this because I've also told people in my community this is not the time to be upset over like tankies or Jill Stein voters or whatever. They aren't the reason why. I voted for Kamala Harris. I champion progressive victory to get people to vote for Kamala Harris, as I will continue to. If liberals are unironically looking for like to play the blame game in that direction, like you aren't interested in winning against Trump. You're fine with Trump. Losing to Trump is to you preferable than losing to Bernie Sanders would have been in 2016. Like you are so in your own ass and you don't give a shit about anything.
Democrats this morning doing their postmortems. I mean, they believed in their ground game. They believed they knocked on the doors they needed to. They hit all their metrics. We've been talking the last couple of days. They're not giving Elon Musk and his group all that much credit, but let's be clear, Elon Musk now will have an outsized role in the Trump administration going forward. Yep. There's also a real sense when we see the final numbers that there was a lot of Democratic angst about her vice presidential pick. Should it have been Josh Shapiro? Most Democrats I've talked to this morning say it wouldn't have mattered. These numbers.
Yep, it wouldn't have mattered. Yeah, 100% it wouldn't have mattered. Absolutely not. 0% chance that nothing would have changed this. The outcome was set in stone. The material forces that brought about this outcome were set in stone long ago. It's possible that literally nothing could have changed this outcome. Donald Trump ran a pretty bad campaign, too.
Suggest that the Walsh-Shapiro choice really wouldn't have mattered. And there's a sense that she did run a good campaign with some real high watermarks. But the problem is her campaign excelled in the big set pieces. She had her meteoric rise. The Democratic convention in Chicago in August was a home run. She obviously cleaned.
And she ran a good campaign. I'll say it. Even if people in chat are like, no, she did. This issue was not decided on Gaza. It was not decided on campaigning with Liz Cheney. It wasn't decided on Bill Clinton. The DNC was an absolute like party. The energy was high. The presumed turnout was high. She was hitting all the right beats. It's liberalism. You were hard countered out the gate. You know, you're playing rock, paper, scissors, and it doesn't matter how good you are at throwing rock if the motherfucker you're up against throws paper. That's it. It's a hard counter. This is not an era for status quo, incumbent liberal, keep things basically the same-ism.
Donald Trump's clock in their debate. But then there were no other set pieces. And the Trump campaign smartly refused to give her another debate. And that just deprived her.
Yeah, she blew Trump out in the debate so badly he didn't want to do another one. Kamala won on like every like it's like praising a person playing rock, paper, scissors for the phenomenal delivery and wrist motion of their rock when the person they're up against is throwing scissors. Like, you threw that rock with unbelievable athleticism, and you were throwing it up against like an octogenarian with weak wrists with paper, you know? You mean paper? Assemble the words in whatever order makes the most sense.
Big moments to introduce herself to the people of the country whose vote she was asking for, because they were still getting to know her. And I will say the last thing, Joe, the one thing that even the most senior folks in the Harris campaign do view as a misstep was when she appeared on The View and was asked point blank, how would you differentiate your policies from Joe Biden? And she didn't really have an answer. She eventually got one a few weeks later, but that was a moment where she had a moment to differentiate herself from a president who's still underwater, very much so underwater in public polling, and she wasn't able to.
She's walking a fine line between respecting Joe Biden and separating herself. Just a few numbers for people who are just waking up this morning on the West Coast. According to our exit poll, Donald Trump won among Latino voters. 45%. He didn't
Kamala
win.
did not engage in non-traditional media enough like Trump did with the Manosphere podcast. It is, I don't think that going on Joe Rogan would have won her the election or anything, but I do agree with Like the only non-traditional media outlet that she went on was that one like woman-led podcast, right? But that's for women. Like you're already winning in that demographic, right? Like 99.9% of Joe Rogan viewers are men. So I don't know. Does campaigning even matter anymore? Maybe it doesn't matter at all. Maybe like the way to campaign from now on. Yeah, the Breakfast Club. Oh, true. She talked to Charlemagne. Maybe like the only way, like the only campaigning, the only thing that matters anymore is just going on a bunch of like podcasters or taking selfies with TikTokers or something. Like maybe that is the only way forward, and just let mainstream media cover the backwash of whatever you produce.
Overall, but he earned the vote of 45% of Latinos, a huge number. Latino men in particular were decisive. Just a note about that Iowa poll that we talked so much about the last few days that had Kamala Harris up by 3 points. Donald Trump right now winning Iowa by 13 points.
It's just unbelievable.
So there's another Donnie, I was looking deep into our exit poll. We talked about young voters, first-time voters. In 2020, Joe Biden won first-time voters 64-32. Young people, first chance to vote, or people who hadn't voted before. Donald Trump last night won first-time voters by 9 points. It's a swing of almost 40 points. There's so much in these numbers to sift through, but at the end of the day, Donald Trump grew his margins in almost every county where he won. He won in places people were shocked to see him win, counties around in New Jersey and New York and Illinois. Just an overwhelming victory.
I think it's interesting. I saw a lot of it with my friends' kids. They're college kids who graduated college, early 20s, first-time voters. And I think I go back to what I said earlier. To them, he was going to solve their problem. And I think particularly for young male voters, his strength, he's going to fix it. He's going to solve it. I don't care about anything else. And I also think a lot of young people are also fed up with very super progressive attitudes. I think the Democrats, Joe, going back to your initial question, and you may disagree with this, I think they need to move to the center. I think the
What
center.
does that mean, though? When you say they need to move to the center, what do they need? Are you saying that they should not support trans people? Like, let's just be specific, because that's what the ads are doing. So if the analysis and the immediate aftermath is they have to move to the center, I mean, what is the center? Because I disagree that is it, but I want to hear what is the center, because you're not the only person, to be clear, I've heard say that. Yeah. I've heard, the Democrats been in my phone this morning.
The center are the people I described before. I'm not even talking about an issue. We can talk about issues. The people I described before who bounce back and forth, who play between the 45-yard lines, that tends to win elections. If you look historically where it is. So that's my feeling.
This political analysis is incoherent. What does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Republicans absolutely did not win because of like men playing in women's sports or whatever. That's like absolutely not. That's like the left lost because of Gaza take, but from the opposite side, where you're going to have some like, pencil-necked weirdo Republicans who are like, well, actually people were fed up of so-called women in women's bathroom. That's not what this election was decided on at all.
And we can agree to disagree.
All right, so we also have with us U.S. Special Correspondent for BBC News, Katty Kay, and staff writer at The Atlantic, Tom Nichols.
Hello.
Tom, you argue in your latest piece for The Atlantic.
You don't think Gaza played a role? Basically not, no. Basically not. People in America don't care about foreign policy. For evidence to this point, look at the entire history of the United States.
That democracy is not over. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. I first want to read Liz Cheney's statement on the results of this election. And she says, she tweeted this out. Our nation's democratic system functioned last night, and we have a new president-elect. All Americans are bound, whether we like the outcome or not, to accept the results of our elections. We now have a special responsibility as citizens of the greatest nation on earth to do everything we can to support and defend our Constitution,
I don't care what she
preserve
thinks.
the rule of law, and ensure that our institutions hold.
I think you're wrong on that foreign policy comment. There were massive protests against Vietnam and Iraq. That's just me, though. Yeah, but that was our soldiers. I'm sorry, maybe I should have been more clear than just saying foreign policy. If the foreign policy actually affects us, then we care about it. If the foreign policy is just like what's going on and being experienced by other people, we do not care about it.
Over these coming 4 years, citizens across this country, our courts, members of the press, and those serving in our federal, state, and local governments must now be the guardrails of democracy. Tom.
This is, unironically, I agree with you, I am tired. This is more spine than Kamala Harris showed in her concession speech. At least this language doesn't have any of this flowery look up into the night sky and see the stars bullshit. It's pretty straightforwardly like, yeah, we're going to have to batter down the hatches, you know? This is unironically like more straightforward and more useful than anything Kamala Harris said.
Your thoughts on the possibility that that can happen?
Well, strangely enough, I think I'm glad that Trump won an outright majority, because I don't think the country could have taken one more election where the Electoral College produced this kind of freak outcome of the loser of the popular vote becoming the president. This is clarity now. You know, Donnie made the point about not walking up to people and, you know, getting in their face. But I think it's on this, we can say, this is a clear choice. This is what you, the American, 51% of the American people wanted. This isn't an accident. It's not the Russians. It's not some fluke. This is a choice, and the American people have made a choice. He is the legitimately elected president of the United States, and I think what Cheney said was absolutely right. And what she said at the end of her statement, I echoed in what I put out this morning, saying, now, if you really care about democracy, you care about what happens in courts, in state houses, in the federal civil service, in the military. You know, these institutions are all still there, and they all require protecting. But I think one of the things that I'm really
protecting how, though?
Concerned about is that, and I actually had been having a bad feeling about this election for a while. It was cemented when I was in Pennsylvania about a week ago, and I had a long conversation with a Trump voter where I came to realize that there was almost nothing, this postmortem that we've all been going through about what Biden could have done, or Harris could have done, or Walz, or Shapiro. I'm not sure anything could have been done, because I think there's been something changed out there in America that's really concerning.
Right.
But I think the notion that these institutions will now all fall in January is wrong. But I think people have ignored that they have elected a man who has made it clear that he is basically lawless, that he has no.
They really don't see the writing on the wall, you know? Like, a lot of them really don't.
To the Constitution, and I think, you know, after the shock of this election wears off, this might start.
I think it's cope. I think so too. I guess it's just kind of wild that, like, Republicans will stub their toe on a curb and scream about how we need, like, the National Guard deployed. Meanwhile, liberals will lose to the guy who says he's going to kill all of them, and the liberals at the end are like, well, he wouldn't actually do that, right? I'm glad it was at least a decisive victory for Hitler too, and not like a long drawn out, you know, complicated one. I don't think the institutions will fall that. Like, where's the alarmism, man?
Start occurring to people again, and the only way to protect it is going to be in all those intermediate and state and local and federal institutions that all need protection now.
You know, Caddy, Tom brings up a great point about the fact that there is a clear choice now, that Donald Trump did win with the majority of the vote, and now it's going to be up to him and the Republicans to run government over the next 2 years. And if they don't run it well, that's why we have midterm elections. And
God almighty, man.
We've been talking this morning. There's a constant back and forth in American politics, and chances are very good that we will see the same thing again.
POV, you're getting ready to vote in 2026, and there's a guy behind you watching you in a red cap. The liberals never think liberals don't think institutions can crumble. They don't even think it's possible.
And 2 years from now.
Yeah, and American voters have proved themselves always very capable of putting a check on somebody they feel they've gone too far. I mean, one of the interesting things in the data that came out is that even people who felt he was too extreme still voted to him, which suggests they don't believe some of the more extreme things he said he's going to do. So whether he actually does remake the nature of the courts, renates the
This is definitely true. There are a ton of Trump supporters who not only don't think he's going to do the more extreme stuff, they don't even know what it is. I bet you a significant number of the new people who voted for Trump have never actually watched a Trump speech. They just hear like, they see like their favorite comedy TikToker riffing off of a soundbite from Trump where they are like, yeah, man, he'll make it good again. Yeah, like they don't, it's just vibes, you know?
Politicizes the American government in the way he's suggested he's going to do. He has the tools to do it, it looks like. And if he gets the House, he'll have power unfettered for 2 years. And he's made it pretty clear that this is what he wants to do, make a government in his image that will do the policies, enact the policies that he wants them to. So let's see if he gets there. I mean, he wants to. Will the American people check him? Will the courts check him? This is going to be a very turbulent couple of years for America, and very turbulent couple of years for the rest of the world watching America.
Yeah. You know, Willie, I think Tom brings up a great point about talking to that Trump voter in Pennsylvania. Of course, we spent time.
They do sound scared. I mean, they kind of should be. Historically, when people like Trump take power, people like this are removed. Trump literally, like every other day, he's like, you should be arrested for criticizing me. You should be arrested for, I think the media should be shot. You should be arrested for da-da-da. Like, literally his closing speech before the election, the last public speech that he gave, he included a joke of he wouldn't mind if a shooter came and gunned down the media crowd in the media pit.
And leading up to the election, looking at the things that Donald Trump was saying that seemed to break constitutional norms, political norms, our basic standards and values. This morning, we're talking about what the Democrats could have done, should have done, would have done. But Tom's right. Sometimes when you talk to Trump voters, and I know a lot of them, they're Trump voters. And you can talk to them for 30 minutes and you can show them chapter and verse of what he said, and it really doesn't matter. And that's family members, that's friends that I've known from, time I was 6 years old. It just doesn't matter. So again, I think it's really important that Democrats look and see what happened, not specifically because of Donald Trump, but because they're losing races in the Senate, they're losing races in the House. This isn't like a one-off, right? This is a Democratic Party that is only 32% of Americans identify with.
Yeah, there's
whatever, man. I can't handle these limp dick neolibs anymore. Can we please turn this off? I mean, the next thing you get to hear is a currently very erect dick fascist, Trump, accepting his victory. So if you want to go right to that, I mean,